For a long time I've been planning on building a wooden pergola, but it just doesn't suit my new house. So this week I've just gone and bought one. For some time I've wanted a canopy or a pergola at the back of the house here to give some shelter in the summer and to also break up the currently flat profile of the house. For the last few years I've set up a temporary pop-up gazebo in this area each summer, so it's time now to put in something more permanent. I've bought a 4 metre by 3 metre aluminium pergola in powder coated anthracite to match the existing windows, and I'm going to centre it on these patio doors of my dining room. So I get on with setting out exactly where the 4 legs are going to end up sitting. 2 right next to the house and the other 2 3 metres away, and this is where I meet my first challenge, as one of the legs ends up on the grass, not the paving. So before I can even think about getting the pergola built, I'm going to have to solve that problem and put in some extra paving. What I could do to accommodate this leg is to simply add a few slabs along the front of the current paving, which, although would work in practice, this Indian sandstone with the different shapes and sizes is supposed to have random joints rather than straight lines like this. So what I really need to do is something a little bit more creative, like this layout, but it does mean removing some of the existing slabs to be able to break up the line. While I was looking at this layout, I then thought the entry of the pergola, where people are actually going to walk into it, looks a little bit tight on the left hand side. So I think I also need to add a bit more paving, just so I don't end up with a pinch point on the left. So after all that planning, it's time to get down to some work. So with something better than just a rough idea, I remove only the grass I need to get the new paving in. If you do dig up lawn like this, have a plan on where to put the material, as whatever you dig out bulks up and always seems to be a lot more than you're expecting. While removing the turf, I found a present from the builders that build the house that I'm sure will come in useful in the future. So I'm just getting down to what's called formation, which is essentially the deepest we're going to dig. And now that I've actually uncovered the side of the paving, I can actually see what the existing paving is sitting on. And it's not particularly good news. From what I can see, there's a layer of mortar somewhere between 30 and 40 mil, with maybe, if I'm being generous, a sprinkling of type 1 underneath. And that's all laid by what we call the professionals. Yeah, right. Today I'm using standard type 1 as a sub-base, as I have a bulk bag of it available, and then I compact it with a number of passes from my whacker plate. For a small area like this, you don't need a whacker plate. You can just use a hand tamper if you don't have access to a whacker plate. I also use one of these in the corners just to make sure I've got good compaction all round. I remove some slabs so I can make a more random pattern, which come up quite easily with a little bit of care. None of these slabs have been sealed properly on the back, so they're not particularly well bonded to the mortar, which makes things a little bit easier. Any existing mortar that I think is going to get in the way of the new slabs, I also take out with my SDS drill. Here I'm aiming for a 5-to-1 mortar mix as a bed in for my slabs. Before I lay each one, I seal the back of them with a cement slurry mix, which will also help them bond to the mortar below. The paving is now complete, and I've left it a couple of days just to get some strength, although I haven't jointed it yet. But I really want to get onto the building of the pergola, whatever, because it's a nice sunny day, so I can do that at a later date. So this pergola is 3 meters by 4 meters in size. So it came in 3 big boxes, the biggest one of which is just over 4 meters long to contain those 4-meter sections, which unfortunately I haven't had room to put inside the workshop. So that's been sitting outside in the weather for the past couple of weeks. So I think it's time that we move all of that in and see if I can put this thing together. Putting together this pergola is what I wanted to get on with from the start, but without the paving in place there's just been no point, so I've had to be patient. The heaviest box here is 65 kilograms, which is pretty substantial and should be moved by 2 people, but once again I'm on my own. This particular aluminium pergola came from the range and it costs just short of £2,000. All the parts are individually wrapped and all the fixings are well labelled, and it comes with a reasonably detailed instruction manual, in some ways similar to IKEA furniture. As everything is nicely powder coated, I'm leaving the wrapping on for as long as possible to avoid any damage. None of this assembly I found particularly difficult, but just like IKEA furniture, some items look very similar but aren't, so you do need to be sure that you're working with the right piece, or else you find yourself having to take things apart and going backwards. Anyone for a kickabout? The heck do I do now? As I'm working on my own, to move this first bit of the assembled frame around without damaging it, I re-box one end just to protect it. Then I can drag it into place without any damage.
If you're thinking about buying one of these or even making one thing that I didn't necessarily appreciate until I almost bought the wrong one was if you're putting it at the back of your house in front of French doors or patio doors like I've got here, the height of it wants to be higher than the top of the door, especially if the doors open outwards, else they're not going to open. It sounds very obvious when you've got it set up like this, but when you think you've got a good deal in the shop and you're ready to put your money down, it's not something you necessarily think about.
With the second frame assembled, I hold it up vertical using a clamp and some wooden bracing. I space the two frames away from each other as accurately as possible so I can fit the two cross members. This is probably the hardest part of this assembly, as I don't want anything to fall and get damaged, and slotting these cross members in isn't the easiest thing when you're on your own, but I manage it, and with each one in and tightened, the whole frame gradually gets more stable. With everything square and together, 4 corner capping plates can then be screwed into the top, which secures everything permanently.
So the way the louvers open and close on this is that there's a handle here that actually sort of winds them open and close, but the mechanism is all on this side. So rather than relying on the louver to sort of bend its way open, they actually give you what I would call a torsion bar. So as this actually opens, the first thing that happens is that this bar gets twisted and transfers that twist to the other side. So all the louvers open on both sides at the same time, rather than putting stress and trying to twist them off. That's a theory anyway.
During this assembly, unusually, I didn't actually have anything that didn't fit or out of shape. It all just went together. However, the challenge, if you're doing this on your own like I am, is in the size of the unit and the number of louvers you've got to fit, because each one you need to climb up to the top of the frame to screw in one end of the louver and then repeat it at the other end times 25.
Wow, that's 1 in, 24 to go. And if I spend the same amount of time on the next 24 as I did on the first one, I'm going to be here till next Thursday. So now's the time to bolt this thing down, and I've got a little bit of a problem because I want it close to the house, which means the base plate of the legs next to the house are going to straddle the patio and this 6-inch strip of gravel that I've got all the way around the house. So what I've done is to dig out that gravel down to about 3 or 4 inches, and I'm going to put concrete in there and essentially build a concrete block so the base plate sits half on the patio and half tied into that concrete block. It just tidies it up, and then I can put gravel back either side. The one good thing about this 6-inch strip of gravel around the house is you can hide cables in it. At the front of the house I've got a stretch where I've got an internet cable going from one room to the other, hidden in that gravel. And at some point in the future I think I'm going to do the same round the back here, probably with low voltage lighting. So if I just dump concrete in that hole and make a pad, suddenly I haven't got a route through. So while I'm doing it, I'm going to put some electrical conduit. This is 25mm black electrical conduit, just so I've got a route through that concrete pad. I'm going to tape up the ends, and if I use it, I don't know, but it's be handy in the future, just in case. I mix a small batch of concrete for the 2 pads, and then set in the conduit into the middle. To get a nice straight edge on either side, I cut a small batten just to lay the concrete up to. The next day the pads have got some strength, so I can remove the protection and the timber at the ends. So the suggested way of bolting this down so it doesn't take off in the wind is 4 bolts at the bottom of each post. However, even if you do that, there's still a little bit of wobble that I don't really like. But because I'm so close to the house, I might as well bolt it to the house. That way it means it's not going to go anywhere. So I've cut a couple of blocks. These are oak blocks that I salvaged from an old table. And I'm going to put those behind the post, bolt it to the house, and then bolt the post to the block with some galvanised brackets here. So even in the worst wind, it's not going to go anywhere. I fit the galvanised brackets to the frame with Tech screws, which cut their own hole into the aluminium and secured the two quite nicely together. To get everything to fit, I temporarily fixed the blocks to the brackets, then position the whole pergola in its final position and mark where the blocks meet the wall. I can then offer up the blocks on their own and fix them to the wall with frame fixings. Just before I tighten them to the wall, I give them a couple of coats of anthracite colour paint, just so they match the pergola. The frame can now come back to its final position and the two get screwed together. To fix the base plates to the patio, I use sleeve anchors that are simply hammered into a 10mm hole through the paving and the concrete, and then tightened up, expanding them in the hole. These are so strong, as long as I get 2 good fixings per leg, I think that's going to be plenty. So there it is, absolutely finished, matching the house, and I'm so glad I didn't go for the traditional wooden pergola, because this powder coated aluminium one actually suits the house far better. And because this is tied into both the house and the paving, I don't think this is going anywhere anytime soon. So it's going to be a really good resource for things like bank holiday barbecues, which reminds me, I think I better go and get the sausages.